Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with my co host. His name is Greg. Together, we're two wacky and unconventional therapists.
Yeah, everyone's favorite, a wacky therapist. That's what everyone's looking
When
for.
I am looking for a therapist, I look for unconventional and wacky as hell.
Not wacky enough. Move on. Good thing there's
No,
better help.
you're definitely wacky enough for most people.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think so. Dave, how's your week been?
It's it's the start of a new week. Last week was forgettable. I don't remember it. So
It's a blur.
hopefully this one will be a little bit better.
Hopefully you didn't take anything or you weren't poisoned or anything. If the week is a blur.
I just literally thought about it and I couldn't remember one thing about last week.
Hey, this is 40, right? That's what they say.
This is more than 40.
Yeah, this is over 40.
Yeah,
Can't even
yeah.
say that anymore.
40
Dave,
plus.
so as you know that I like to brag about, I do teach a couple of classes at Providence College, and we often come across Socrates. And I don't know if you've ever studied that whole like Socratic method where he talks to people and he asks them a million questions, and then they end up realizing that they know nothing about the thing they thought they knew everything about.
Hmm.
And it's a pretty annoying. Like actually, I think that's part of why everyone just wanted him to die. But there's something there that's kind of interesting, right? Something like people have convinced themselves either they have the answers or they don't have the answers. And I don't know, I think that aligns pretty nicely about what we're talking about today.
Does
What do
it?
you think? Yeah, I do. I do think so because people have this innate ability to change themselves. But here's the thing, right? Like, so if you tell your kids or you tell anybody really that there's something like, here's the answer to your problems, or you're doing this wrong, they might push back against that. But if people think it's their idea, then they're more likely to kind of find it more useful, I think.
So there is a definite truth to that.
Hmm.
And I heard a quote of somebody saying the line that people tend to believe themselves more than they believe others. So there is something to that for sure. And whenever somebody tells me that they're struggling to help somebody and they're offering all this advice or they just the person won't take it or they're just not sinking in. I always recommend that they somehow find a way to make it feel like it was that
Hmm.
person's idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that really the strategy to use with people, is to somehow make it seem like they came up with the idea? Because the idea probably is already inside of them.
But I think people are probably saying, like, no, that's not true. Like, I kind of feel like the reason why I come to therapy is because I don't have the answer. But I often think of people who are, maybe potentially ending a relationship. This is something that I just saw today. And it's like you know exactly what you need to do. Maybe you just don't want to have to go through it. Or like, if you're struggling with something or there's, even depression or something that like you're not choosing or you haven't gotten yourself into on your own. It's like, is there anything that I'm doing that's getting in the way of me feeling better? If I'm honest with myself. And you could probably look at it and say, yeah, I'm not doing this and I know that I should be. But it's hard to do. It's hard to do. And this idea that we already have everything we need to kind of figure out our own issues, it's very Carl Rogers. And I think a lot of this seems to have evolved from person-centered therapy. Like, how are you getting someone to believe what you're saying, or how are you guiding someone to kind of end up at their own solutions, and that's like reframing and paraphrasing and trying to listen to them and understand where they're coming from. Like that's all person-centered stuff, and I think that's kind of the basis of this, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So did we actually say what we're talking about today?
No, afraid not. But we are talking about motivational interview. Yeah, which I always found. I don't know when we talked about this
You're saying it
in.
as if people know what this is.
That's true.
So what is motivational interviewing?
Like, what is it? it's
Yeah, for
it's a
anyone listening, like what would all right, so when you go to therapy, this is
mm,
another one of those therapeutic approaches is what I'm trying to
sure.
say.
Yeah.
Because there's probably a bunch of people that have no idea what motivational if I wasn't in this field, I wouldn't know what motivational interviewing is. And hopefully we have some people that aren't actually in the field that are listening.
Yeah.
I would hope. Um, so yeah, motivational interviewing is a type of therapeutic approach that some therapists might utilize for specific reasons, or sometimes it's just maybe it's just something that is kind of like their thing, so they might utilize it for a very broad variety of people. Now, Greg, what types of things is it known to be most used for?
Well, I mean, a lot of times it's used with addiction. Um, even like health disorders, weight loss, smoking cessation. I guess it's like a nice way of asking, is there anything that you're doing that's getting in the way of your growth or your health or stopping that thing that like there's like a cognitive dissonance thing that you're trying to get around where it's like, I have diabetes, but I'm like my mother. She eats a lot of chocolate and she eats my I smoked for years. I knew that was bad for you. If you drive by any hospital, you see nurses smoking outside. There's a cognitive dissonance there. And so though in a sense that person can benefit from be motivational interviewing, but anybody can really, right? Almost any kind of disorder could benefit from this because essentially it's like doing the thing therapists are supposed to do. It's guiding rather than just blatant advice, right? It's like staying away from that and giving the power to the person to figure out what's going on in their life and how to guide them to the answers.
Right. Yeah, because if you're going to therapy, there's this general thought that maybe there's something that you're trying to work on.
Hmm.
You and I both know that some people go to therapy and that's maybe not their reason for going to therapy. Some people just like therapy.
Way more often than you would ever imagine
I
that's
am
the case.
it's mind-boggling. And
Yeah.
actually, when you sit back and you realize that this person really just wants someone to talk to, it's kind of like, whoa, all right. So that changes everything about how I'm going to approach this person, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, other people who are coming to work on a thing, there's this idea that there's something that maybe they want to change or might need to change, and maybe they don't want to yet, or they're not acknowledging of what it is. But there's probably something that's going on that, as their support, you identify would be helpful if they changed, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, so that's true. It's more of like a focused thing. Like you kind of do have in order for motivational interviewing to work, there's a couple of things that have to be going on. One, you have to be unmotivated. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's not really gonna work if you're like a super motivated person and have
Well, you
gotten
probably don't need it at that
right,
point,
right,
because
right.
unless you really just need help with identifying what exactly it is that you're trying to change. But yeah, for the most part, someone should come in, well, would probably come in the lesser motivated phases,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
would think.
Understanding that they have something to change, but feel like they're kind of at a loss and have run out of ideas.
I just thought of maybe an idea that might contradict that, though. So
Okay.
I did actually see something about motivational interviewing being used for like health, wellness, and fitness.
Okay.
And like, as like a maybe if you're like supporting or coaching someone in like a fitness journey, they might have some level of motivation, but maybe not know what needs to change exactly. That's just a thought.
Yeah, no, that actually makes sense, right? Or maybe they feel like they've plateaued, but they really haven't.
Yeah.
And
They're
they've kind
like,
of
whoa, look at these buys. They're peaking, bro. And then like, they're like, I think they could peak a little
yeah.
higher.
There's no way they can get any bigger, but that's not true. Have you ever seen bigger buys? That'd be a
Yeah.
question.
But your tries are lacking. So, right. So there's some key qualities with motivational. Let me try that again. There's
It's
some key
hard.
qualities with motivational interviewing that it embodies. So first of all, the style of communication is more of a guiding style,
Yeah.
and it's all about kind of listening and directing, and it's designed to empower the person to change by drawing out their own meaning and importance and capacity for the change. And also it's based on respect and being curious of just being with people and facilitating the process of change in a way that kind of like honors the person's autonomy.
Yeah, no,
So
I
it's
like
not
that.
forcing it.
I love that respectful and even more than respectful, curious, right? Because I'm a firm believer, and working in the emergency room these past couple of weeks, I've noticed one thing that's true of all people is that people just want you to try and understand them. That's it. And that's the curiosity piece there. It's like that's it. Once you start trying to understand someone, that like calms everyone right down. It's like, look, I'm trying. I'm trying to understand and I'm trying to kind of put myself in your position. Plus, like with motivational interviewing, it's not you're losing that power dynamic thing, right? Like where it's like you're not the it's not the therapist and the client. It's not two people facing each other and trying to like haggle with a problem. It's like two people turning towards a problem and saying, what are we going to do to address this thing? Let's put our heads together on this and really involving the person in the treatment. It's like, that's like, it's almost wild to think of you're sitting with someone who's struggling with, depression or even like, OCD. And it's like saying to them, man, like you're the expert of this OCD, and you like, what do you think are some of the things that we could do to treat this thing? Like, what has ever worked? Like, what do you see being useful to you? Like, that's a partnership. That's them being like, all right, well, let's bounce some ideas off each other here. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. One of the most challenging things for this approach is the way that the clinician has to engage with the client
Mm,
is to approach them as an equal partner, which means avoiding giving advice,
yeah.
confronting the person, instructing them, like directing them or warning them of things. You really have to be non-biased. You have to almost be a sounding board or a mirror, I guess, in some ways. Like, even if you have this thing that you really want to tell the person because you know that what they're saying is like has like you could provide more information, basically.
Hmm.
You have
Like,
to
just break
refrain
up
from
with
doing
him.
that.
Just break up with him. You know what I mean? Like you.
Or like with smoking, don't you know like the things that could like all the warning things you would want to give them, or even like if you had thoughts about, well, so much with smoking and things like of addicting things are about like routines, right?
Mhm.
And it's so hard to break routines and or association. Like if you even if you had thoughts about ways they could work around that, you can't do it.
Yeah, you'd have to like getting curious. Like, say you're talking about smoking, you'd have to be say something along the lines of like, does like, oh, like how long you been smoking? Oh, does that ever like get in the way of anything? Do you still feel good? Like I just be curious about it. Like, oh, does that like limit your breathing? I mean, I've that's what I've heard. I've never really experienced that. Like, you know what I mean? Just have them tell you like what is their experience with it,
What does it feel
and
like?
is it cool? It looks cool.
What do you do with the smoke when you take it out
Can
of
you
the
blow smoke
cigarette?
rings? And then you just go down that path and
And you do it in front of me?
yeah. Can you blow a ship like Gandalf?
So
Yeah.
it's really about it's not about getting people to change. It's about, I guess in a way, it's almost motivating them to even want to do it, right?
Mhm. Yeah, because once you kind of someone on their own sees the destination, the path reveals itself. That's very Taoist, but that's true, right? Once they see, like, you know what, this is the direction I want to go now. Like, you haven't convinced them of that. They've figured out on their own through like your slight guidance that this is the direction I want to go now. And now the path's going to reveal itself a lot easier, and they're going to see less, you know, obstacles, and they're going to see more paths forward, and that's
Yeah.
cool.
So here's kind of like the setting for a person who motivational interviewing could potentially be very helpful for
Sure.
in kind of exploring their situation. So someone whose ambivalence is high and feels maybe stuck and has mixed feelings about change. So kind of what we were talking about,
Hmm.
not being super overly motivated, but also not like, no, I'm not going to change right now. Um, if their confidence is low and they have doubts about their abilities to change, if the desire is low and they're uncertain about whether they want to make a change, or the importance is low and the benefits of change and the disadvantages of the current situation are unclear. Hopefully, you can try to provide some clarity or help them provide some clarity for themselves.
Yeah, and those are situations where, like, maybe someone's manic, and sometimes the disadvantages of the mania seem unclear to the person, but you're getting input from family members and friends, or maybe the drinking doesn't seem like, hey, like my life's not really affected by my drinking, but then you've got input from family members and friends, and you get to kind of reveal to them like what through the lens of other people too. I think that's a useful thing. Like,
Yeah.
kind of question like, hey, do you think this is affecting anybody else though? I know it seems like you're doing really well for yourself. It's almost like compliment sandwich thing where it's like, wow, like you're doing pretty well despite what people may have to say about people who drink, right? Do you think like is there any way or anybody in your life that's affected by this, or is it if you just skating kind of clear and like force, I don't know, force some introspection, I guess.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't think I have, if you were to be like, dude, I don't think I have a problem drinking. And I'm like, Greg, last Friday you were at the bar singing Wilson Phillips and then you left the bar and showed everyone your booty cheeks before you left.
And
I
then you
think
came to
there's a,
work with their clothes on backward.
I think there's a problem there, Greg.
And I would say, Dave, I think you're missing the point. I came to work, remember? So there are core elements of this motivational interviewing, and one is the most important. It's the partnership. This is collaborative, right? So us as the practitioners, we're supposed to be an expert in helping people change. But the reality is, people are the experts of their own lives. They're the experts of their own mental illnesses. Like anxiety is anxiety, but the way it manifests in someone's life really matters, right? It's very like specific. And I think that letting people know like you're the expert of how this thing is affecting you. Like let me know more about it, right?
Yeah.
So evocation, people have within themselves resources and skills that they need for change. And using motivational interviewing kind of helps these people draw out these things. It draws out their values and their wisdoms and gives them the confidence to change and continue to change, right? So acceptance is always going to be a piece in almost every theoretical approach, and MI is no different. So us as the practitioner, we try to take a non-judgmental stance and try to understand the person's perspective, experiences, and we try to express empathy. We talk about their strengths and we respect a person's choices, like the choices that they made up until this point and the choices that they're going to make going forward. And we don't really judge it. We just kind of talk about it with them,
Yeah.
right? And we
Yeah.
try to be compassionate. Obviously, caring and having some empathy really goes a long way when you're helping someone change, right? People want someone to listen to them and kind of care about what's going on in their lives. That's like all people want, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that as ridiculous as it is to say? Like that is like having empathy, having someone be like, yeah, like that must be hard, or ah, man, like I don't know how you're handling that. Like it must be really tough. Like I don't know. Like the few times in my life where someone's showed me like that empathy, it's been like really helpful, and it kind of just makes you agree with them and be like, yeah, it is. It has been hard. Thanks for like noticing that.
You're welcome, Greg. Um, it's funny because like for the most part, I'm not like a super chatty person. So when I say something to someone, I, have the expectation or hope that they're going to listen. Have you ever just
Mhm.
seen two people that like really just like to talk and, maybe they're just very talkative people and they're not even listening to each other? But they like, have you ever witnessed something like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's so bizarre to me because it's like, in my mind, I'm like, what's the point of even talking if you're not even if nobody's listening or vice versa? Like, why even bother? But some people don't seem to care as much. But when you do care and you feel like someone's not hearing you or listening to you, it's the most frustrating thing I think in the world.
Yeah.
You can kind of understand how
Literally the
this
most
approach,
frustrating thing in the world. That's like
yeah,
where anger comes from, where it's like,
nobody's
you're not
listening to me.
understanding me. You don't get me. Like
Yeah.
you're disrespecting me because you don't understand where I like what I've been through, where I'm coming from. That's
Like
it.
when you're arguing with someone or having like a heated debate
Yeah.
And you can tell that the person isn't hearing a thing you're saying because they're sitting there thinking about the next thing they want to say, drives me nuts. Like you can almost see it on the person's face that all they're doing is thinking about the next thing they want to say. And I guarantee you there are therapists out there that do that.
Hmm.
They're so like wanting to make the perfect point that all they're doing is thinking about their next point, and they're not listening to what the patient is saying. So as a therapist, it is super important that we are being super present in the moment and listening and trying to demonstrate that we're listening and we're understanding. So the big there's a this thing called ORs with
Yeah, I know what
motivational
ors are.
interviewing. You know what ORs are?
Yeah.
What are they?
Oh, they guide you down your life's stream.
Oars?
Yeah, oars, like boat oars. I'm trying. It's
Oh,
kind of like a
I
not.
thought you were like making like a sexual reference or something like that. I'm like, where are you going with this? I don't
Oh
know what that
wow,
means.
no.
Well, I just know how your mind works. Anyways,
It's just full of sexual references.
yes,
You know me.
exactly. Um, so OARS, OARS, that is an acronym, and here's what it stands for. So the O is for open questions. So this is the as the therapist, you're asking open questions versus questions that what's the opposite of an open question?
A closed one,
Closed questions. Yeah.
like yes or
So
no, like yes or no
yeah,
questions.
exactly. So you want the person to explore their perspective or their thoughts about things versus just giving those simple, quick answers. The next part of it, the A, is affirmation of strengths, efforts, and past successes to help build the person's hope and confidence in their ability to change. The R is for reflections, and that is when the therapist, this is that part of listening, when they kind of demonstrate their listening by reflecting back to the person what the kind of what they just described and offer maybe a rephrasing of it with a deeper thought about what the person was trying to communicate. And that will often express something like validation or
Mhm.
empathy or just understanding, right?
Yeah.
Reflective listening is a really important key in most it actually a few therapeutic approaches, so this it's not
Yeah.
just for this one. And then
Again,
the
very Rogers,
very
very
Rogers, yep.
persons. Yeah.
And then the S is for summarizing, which helps kind of ensure that there's understanding and reinforces the key points that were made by the client. So I appreciate this kind of like acronym to kind of summarize the approach because I think that those four ideas right there really do kind of summarize the real core of what this is about, right? Which is all about listening and understanding
Yes.
and exploring.
Right. And I almost feel like it's harder than it needs to be. It's really just again, there's four fundamental processes, and it doesn't. I don't know if it has to be. It's just about engaging, right? That would be the first one, and this is the whole foundation of it. Just to establish this working relationship, just listening to each other and accurately reflecting the person's experience. And I'll have a lot of times where I'll ask somebody, like I'll reflect something back to someone and say like, so you're kind of feeling like this, and they will say to me, and I really appreciate it when they do. And you're seeing your therapist, if they're getting you wrong, make sure you say like, no, that's not what I mean. I kind of mean it more like this. And I'm like, whoa, who's the worst reflector you've ever met?
Oh, so
And
you pretty often like don't understand your patients.
so I wouldn't say that, but the patients that I'm like really comfortable with, and typically it is someone who I've been with for a while. They will say like, no, it's more like this. Have you never had that?
I have this one guy who every time I say something along those lines, he always says, no, it's more like this, or no, it's more, it's, he always
Yeah. Yeah.
puts me down. And it kind of like dawned on me, he's very literal. He might even
Mm,
be on the
a
spectrum.
little. Yeah. Okay.
Um, and sometimes when I reflect things, I think he doesn't see where it's going,
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah.
going with that reflection. and he takes his thought very literal, and he just, I don't think he knows really what I'm saying sometimes in
Yeah,
that
look,
setting.
and I could just be getting it completely wrong sometimes, right? But I do try to always reflect back to someone or almost summarize slightly what they're saying because I do think it does say to them, all right, I'm trying to process what you're saying to me. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. Like, before we go any further, I want to be able to reflect back to you what you're trying to say to me. And I think if even in relationships, if you do that to each other in a relationship, like when you're arguing, it's like, all right, well, hold on. Before we go any further, let me understand like what you're trying to tell me right now. If you can like reflect that back and kind of do that a little bit, even in relationships without being completely weird, that's so helpful, right?
Oh, 100%.
Let me make sure I'm hearing you right.
That's the
So
opposite of what most people do. So when you do that, it's very disarming,
yeah, yeah,
especially, and this might be a little sexist, but like that is not something that men typically do.
no,
So if it's like a heterosexual relationship, for a male to do that to a female would be very disarming and probably very appreciated. I feel like a lot of times in those types of relationships, when if the male is my patient, that is something I try to help them understand, is like sometimes you just gotta demonstrate that you're actually understanding where they're coming from instead of always trying to fix the problem.
yeah, and it also keeps the conversation or the argument on track where like you can get in an argument with your partner or whatever, and you're going on for a while, and now you're talking about something that has nothing to do with the initial problem anymore, and you're just kind of being combative and talking like trying to cut people down a little bit, or it's just gotten to a place where it's like that was not where the problem was at all, and you're fighting about something that's not the problem at hand.
Mm,
So like focusing, that's a good way to insert this here. So that's the second of the four fundamental processes. So focusing obviously is the process in, we this is agenda, like we it's agenda focused. Like we have an issue that we're trying to work on, and we're drawing on it, we're focusing on it, and we're trying to move in a direction to change the behavior if necessary. So that's where MI kind of, you know, is a little bit different from what we typically do, where it's gonna have a shelf life, right? It's gonna be sort of, I don't know, it's gonna have a time limit on it, like more like CBT in a sense, right?
yeah.
And then evoking is the process where we gently explore and help the person build their own reason, like their why, like we've talked about so many times. Like sometimes if you can just get this one thing, the reason why someone should change, maybe it's for a kid, maybe it's for their health. Maybe if you don't stop smoking, you're gonna die. Maybe if you don't stop smoking, your
Yeah,
kid's gonna pick it up,
but the
right?
thing is, yeah, and I think it's such an important point to remind ourselves is in this approach, it's helping the patient understand their reason why,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
the
yeah.
reason why that we might think they should. So it's really interesting when you think about it, because
Great
like, and
point.
I'm sure you see that all the time. The things that you think should motivate someone sometimes don't.
Yeah,
But then you'll
you're right.
find this one thing that, like, for some reason, that's the reason that they feel they need to change, and that's the one you have to continue to help them explore. It could be, yeah, so if you keep smoking, you could, you could die.
Mhm.
And for that person, that could be not a very motivating reason for change.
Yeah, or maybe that's not really real to them. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna die anyway. Like there could be that whole conversation, right?
Sure.
My grandfather smoked and he lived to be 96. I'm fine with if I die at 91, I think I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? There's you're right. It is about finding, that was a great point, the personal why of someone. Not why society says you should stop, not why society says you shouldn't do drugs or because everyone's gotten, has their own story, and
Yeah.
this is about kind of learning that story and, you know, helping guide them through their lens of their life, not
I have
through
a
your
I've
moral compass.
I have kind of a good example, I guess.
Okay.
So I have this individual who um he like exhibits manic behavior every now and then. So he'll go through periods of time where he's just totally not doing anything to help himself. He might stop taking his medications. He's quit like so many jobs, all this different stuff. When I'm exploring his reason for change, it's really hard for him to pinpoint something that motivates him until we get to the point of his kids. And when I ask him, like, well, what would happen with your kids if, you weren't around anymore, if you did something to harm yourself? And he was able to kind of like highlight or pinpoint some things that would really bother him. Like if he wasn't present, he wouldn't be able to influence their lives in the positive
Yeah.
way that he feels he does. He wouldn't be able to kind of steer them in the right directions. He started to express that he was concerned about choices they might make, about how they might feel. And it was like suddenly it was like so clear, like, well, here's your why, right?
Here's your why. That's often the thing too, where it's like people who are struggling getting through something that's so dark like that, and it does often come down to, even if they don't have kids, if you can figure out how to get through this, if you could figure out how to get through this, then you have the knowledge to help someone else through this
Yeah.
someday. And maybe that's why you're going through this. Kind of like puts a little meaning on it. So like that's a good like sort of meaning making word, like
And
finding the
I'll be
why.
honest, like actually exploring that felt very basic and very simplistic,
Yeah.
but it really did change his behavior. So he has diabetes that were untreated. And all of his physicians were basically saying like this could definitely be impacting your mood, your mental health, your physical health in so many
Mhm.
different ways. We're sitting here trying to offer you, support for these other things, but like that probably needs to be the priority. Kind of identifying that why was able to motivate him to actually address the diabetes and has had some positive changes since then. So it really can be helpful to, but like, had I gone a different route and just like reminded him of all the other things in life that might motivate people, it wouldn't have worked for him because he didn't care
Hmm.
about those things.
No. That's right. So it is very personalized, and that's important. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
So to get back, these are the four fundamental processes of MI, and we talked about engaging, we talked about focusing, we talked about evoking or finding the why. And just as important as finding the why, or the next logical step would be planning. And to me, that's finding the how, right? You get the why. Sometimes we forget about the how. It's almost like I tell people all the time that you are the choices that you make. You are what you repeatedly do. And what's interesting about that is like, okay, like I am the choices I make. I have to make the right choices to be the kind of person that I want to be. But how are you making the choices that you're making? And that's your values. So that's the how, right? So you identify your values and you start living a values-based life. And that's kind of how these things are all sort of intertwined with each other. So you figure out, all right, I need to stop doing what I'm doing like your patient so that I can, be there for my kids and kind of, have be something that they can learn from or be there when they need me, all these sort of things. Now, how do I make it so I start making the decisions, the kind of person who's going to be around? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do I, what's the roadmap to sort of get to this place where I now want to be? And that's where you kind of come in as the therapist to kind of talk about that stuff. And
Yeah.
not to figure it out for them, but to talk about it, right?
Yeah. So, something that we learned in school, and there's people that are going to school that listen to this, and they're probably learning about this at this moment as well. Are the stages of change,
Hmm.
and these are also talked about, I believe, in addiction or substance use models as well when they talk
Yeah.
about stages of change. I think that's a pretty important thing for us to understand. So the stages of change are important for MI therapists because or people who are going to use the MI model because you have to identify where that patient is in the stages of change in order to kind of understand what types of questions you need to be asking or where you're at as far as like the exploring and all that good stuff. So the very first stage of change is the pre-contemplation stage. At this point, they may think that they don't need to change. They might come off as reluctant, rebellious, um, resigned. So basically, you know, they're unwilling to consider the change, or they're comfortable and adverse to taking a risk and unaware of consequences. So this is a person who really doesn't know what dangers their behavior is doing to them,
Mhm.
or they're maybe aware but they're just not willing to change it at this moment. They don't, maybe they don't see the impact it's having, right?
Yeah.
So their core thoughts might be something along the lines of, I don't need to change. That's probably where Greg is in his life right now,
So
pre-contemplation.
far, yeah, I'm kind of there.
The next one is the ambivalence phase. And this is where the client is, or the patient is starting to think about change, but is ambivalent while weighing and examining the benefits of the obstacles to change. So, what might be some reasons someone's ambivalent?
It's hard.
It is hard.
Change is hard.
The thing that always comes to my mind when I think of ambivalence, because God knows I have been there,
Mm.
um, comfort,
Hmm.
safety, complacency.
Yeah,
And
and you can kind of like, if I change, then I could fail, and then
yeah,
I'll feel worse.
yeah. It's also that idea like, man, it will come, right? It's like
Mhm.
maybe almost procrastination in a way, right?
Like apathy, like whatever.
Yeah, it will happen, or whatever. So that's probably a good stage to be in for MI,
Hmm.
because
That
I feel
almost
like
like, yeah, it's a
you
great
can
one.
work with that, right?
Yeah.
I recently had a few people that, like, I definitely started to use the MI approach for right around the new year, because I was like, what better way than for me to go on my whole spiel about setting goals and not resolutions, and I was talking about my Daruma dolls again and all that stuff, the goal dolls. But like, I've been getting people to write down goals, and it's so far it's been a lot of fun. People are really starting to like embrace this idea that, like, yeah, goals are good. Resolutions are probably a setup. So
Yeah.
we've been exploring a lot of that recently, which has been fun.
So I'm actually the same exact way. I use the time markers of the year to kind of get into things for sure. And
Yeah.
this time of year is definitely like, let's get the
Are you
goals.
getting a lot of pushback?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
Same.
I don't. I'm always like, let's every once in a while with people. Every few months, I'm kind of like, let's check in on the goals.
Yeah.
And
the
you
the
have to.
pushback I'm getting right now though is like, oh, well, I don't believe in the New Year stuff. It's just a day. I'm like, I don't care if it's just a day. It's such a helpful thing to have in life. Why
Hmm.
not take advantage of something that we actually have that can be used as a nice benchmarker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Fresh
Why
start.
why are we, and I think I've been there too, and I don't even know why. Why are we so set that, like, New Year's doesn't mean anything? Those attitudes, that attitude that people have, and
Yeah,
I
it's
know I know I've had at times.
like as a society, we've become like sort of contrarian by nature.
Anti. It's
Yeah,
kind of like the anti
yeah.
Valentine's Day thing, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's very
anti
like,
New
this is a
Year's Eve.
bummer that like I don't want to do this. And for me, as I get older, I'm kind of like pro.
Same,
I'm
same.
like,
I
let's
say
do
that
it.
all
Like,
the time.
let's a
Yep.
reason to celebrate, a reason to try something. Like, let's just give it a shot. I try to find the positive in things, and there's a reason why there are all these markers throughout the year because it keeps things interesting and keeps you kind of like moving
Yeah.
towards something. Why just be ambivalent? It's no fun.
Right. Right. The
So, Dave,
next
what's next?
the next stage is preparation.
Oh,
So in the preparation stage, they may see change as important and start viewing themselves as actually capable of making the change. They'll often make yes but statements,
yes,
which
but
might
preparation age.
might put off taking steps towards change. So they're ready, they're getting there, but
Hmm.
it's not quite in that change state yet. But we're
Yeah,
we're so close, right? They might
and
actually even feel like they're changing.
absolutely. Preparation is, that's who comes in early in the restaurant and gets things set up, ready to go. The prep cook, right? This is
Yeah,
this is where it's everything. Without that, without the preparation, you could fail pretty easily,
right.
right? And then, Dave, if you don't mind if I jump in right here, this is my favorite, and it's always going to be my favorite. And there's forms of therapy based on this word alone, and that's action, right? Change is visible. Change is happening. You're moving towards something. And as you start to act towards something, like these things just it what is that thing like it steamrolls or snowballs, that's the one, right? Where you take one step towards something and then you figure out, oh, maybe I can't get any further on this without tackling this problem, and this next obstacle presents itself, but then you're moving forward and forward, and you could have setbacks, and you might want to like fall back into the old behaviors, but this at this stage it's like you kind of, if you do have a setback, it's you run yourself through the process again, right?
And then a steamroller runs you over and then you're done.
If you're not careful, right? So
Steamroller
it's
and
it's
snowball.
it's
Totally
action to
different.
me always the most important, right?
Yeah. All right. And what's the last one, Greg?
Maintenance.
What's
That's
that mean?
do you have, I feel like I have like maybe 75% of my people are in the maintenance stage right now.
Yeah. I have a number of them too in the maintenance phase.
You know, but I'm fine with that. And I've had that conversation like, do you want to and we talked about an older, much older, believe it or not, maybe more older than twice of our age, therapist who thinks that the maintenance stage is kind of unnecessary. And it's like, once you're healed. And I just can't agree with that. I think we're all a constant work in progress. And when you stop trying to work on yourself, like that's when things are, not to say that you should always be like, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, but like working towards yourself is, I think that's a lifelong process.
I think if you know yourself, you know the work that you need to do
Mhm.
or in order to keep up with something
Maintain. Yeah.
and maintain.
Maintain.
If
Yeah. You
if
can't just
you're
be
the
like,
right.
I'm gonna start eating whatever. I'm gonna start doing, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you start eating and you start to like notice, oh yeah, like I'm kind of like feeling a little sluggish or like whatever, like keeping an eye on your health and your mental health more is just as important as physical health, I
You
think.
know, I just had this thought because like for some people the maintenance is a lot more than others. And
Hmm.
sometimes I do genuinely feel bad for, well, I shouldn't say bad. I feel empathy for some people who express how difficult they know their maintenance is always going to be. For some people, maintenance for them involves a lot more work than others. It
Hmm.
it involves like having to constantly fight off demons,
Yeah.
weigh pros and cons and make sure they're making good choices. And it just, for some people, it's a lot. Constantly monitoring their stress levels. Just, I do feel for those people, but it is necessary in order to keep yourself on the right track and live a fulfilled life, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
life that you have potential to live.
And as you say that, I am thinking about like addiction.
Yeah. Addiction for
Yeah.
sure.
And
I
addiction
think
shows up.
I think addiction, I think of people who maybe have like bipolar, who always kind of have to monitor their stress and
Sure.
um just so many different things
Yeah.
that I think for some people it's a lot to always kind of have to be aware of, you know.
Even anxiety and depression, right? Like
Mhm.
anxiety is like a daily fight for some people. And they have to do the things that they have to do to kind of live a meaningful life with that anxiety going along for the ride with them every day.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're not working on that, then it's like it could be easy to just be like, you know what? I'm not doing it today. I'm not going there today. And you close yourself in that way. So a maintenance phase is important. And I don't care what the
Super
insurance company
important.
says, you
Yeah.
know?
Super important. Super important. Um yeah, insurance. So
I know.
so one of the important things, if a person is kind of scoring low on like self-efficacy, right? There's
Mhm.
scales that we might use to measure their self-efficacy, and they're feeling like they're unable to change. Um, there's some questions that we can ask that might help kind of build self-efficacy. So some of those questions could look like, tell me about a time that you made change in your life. How did you do it? What personal strengths do you have that would help you succeed? Imagine you decided to change. what about you would enable you to do it? What encourages and inspires you? What could you support in? Who could offer support in making this change? Things like that. So those
Yeah.
are like examples of questions you might ask someone who's really having a hard time kind of understanding if they can make change happen or not.
Right. And I guess the building efficacy could just be sort of tweaked a little bit and said, like, agency, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do you become the best agent for yourself? Like, how do you do like, if you were your own agent, like a sports agent, like, the sports agent's supposed to make, is that, you're the sports guy, supposed to make good decisions for you, right? Like, get your life on track and kind
I mean,
of,
they're going to make the decisions that make you the most bank.
that's right. So, if you're practicing a good agency, then you're gonna make the decisions that are get you the most bank, and that's emotional bank and physical bank and
Yeah. Agents are the worst, but
not for the
they,
person.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's so for others, they are.
Yeah.
But because they're just so focused on getting that person their max potential. It's funny though, because all right, so this is kind of a random off tangent, off topic tangent, sort of. Uh Agents. I talk to agents once in a while when I'm like trying to like connect with actors and filmmakers and stuff like that for my other podcast. And they are the worst. They will try to charge money for people who I know would talk to me for free.
Yeah.
Their priority is to get that person the most amount of money. They do things that we probably wouldn't even do for ourselves. Think about that
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah. Like I need
We would
blue
lowball
M&Ms.
ourselves, but if I got an agent to like advocate for my like if I had an agent to advocate for my rate of pay at therapy, they would go way beyond what I would charge for someone to talk to me without a doubt.
And they would protect your time, right? You know what I mean? They would
Why
be like,
can't we treat ourselves so good?
be your building
Wow,
self-efficacy
did we
is
just come up
becoming
with a
an
new
agent
concept
for
here?
yourself. Yes,
Be your
dude.
own agent.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Shit.
We need
Okay.
to start treating ourselves like that. Like we are someone who has importance and deserves that. I
Not
mean,
just
that's
we.
a concept I think you and I over the past year or so have started to try to embrace. Not
Hey, listen, we're in the pre-contemplation stage
Yeah,
of that.
we really have been having conversations and so funny like not exactly how we're describing them now, but talking about what we what do we deserve in our
Mhm.
for our employment, what kind of rates should we expect or things like that. And it's because we're not in the business world, we're in the human services world, so
I know,
it's an
I know.
icky conversation for so many of us when you think
Yeah,
about that, but it's something that we've been trying to embrace,
we
being our
have.
own agent. And I think that's
Not
so
going
important.
great.
Not going great. It's not our strong suit, but hopefully we can get better at it.
Yeah.
But
Look,
whatever
that's
it
that's actually
is,
a great way to look at it though, isn't it? Like just
yeah,
becoming our own agents and not like second guessing and saying like, no, this is what we deserve. And being
because we know what we want.
be your own agent and be someone you admire if you can combine those two things where it's like I don't want more than I deserve, but I'm certainly not going to
Yeah.
take less.
I mean, we're talking specifically about like pay, right? But
Right
like
now, yeah, we it's
this could
drifted
be
into that.
for anything,
Yes.
right? But for us specifically, one of the big topics that we've had in our employment, not in the podcast world because there is no pay here, for our employment has been about what do we deserve? What should we expect for a rate of pay? And yeah, it's so easy to lowball ourselves.
Yes, and I know a lot of future therapists listen to this, and so keep that in mind. Don't be
Yeah,
afraid of that.
yeah.
Like, let's grow.
It's the whole conversation is really starting to make me think now. So,
Yeah. Uh, don't get all worked up.
all right. Well,
All right.
I had some example questions for what you might ask in the various phases. I'll just run through a couple and
Okay.
you can kind of see where this leads you, Greg, what thoughts you come up with when I say these. So
Okay,
for the
good.
pre-contemplation phase, so this is that person who's, you know, not really wanting to explore change, right? Some things you can say is it sounds like you feel pretty low and you do not see any benefit to taking any medication. Will you talk with me about that so I can better understand how you were feeling? So if this person's it sounds like this was very specific to someone not taking medication. I didn't
Yeah,
read these ahead of time. I should have, so I understood the context. Um, you might say, has there ever been a
I might
time
say
you
like
felt
if
better?
so if I were you in session with you, I might say, but I don't take any medication.
Well, um,
Yeah,
has there ever been a time you felt better? Or I can see or understand changes scary, uncomfortable, or pointless to you. I am wondering if you have always felt this way. I like that question because
mm,
maybe there was a time it didn't, and they might talk about that time, and then they might talk about a failure they had or how something they expected didn't go the way they expected, right?
I like that question too. Yeah,
How will you know when it's time to think about changing?
that's another good question.
Mm-hmm. Are there other times when you had to make a change in your routine? What did you do? Was it hard at first? So those are a couple examples
Those
for
are
the
good. Like
guys.
or even like, have you noticed something or felt recently or lately that maybe it's coming close to time to change?
No, that was a bad one, Greg. It was a closed question.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Or even yes.
Yeah.
So you got
Tell
to
me more
get it.
about that.
There you go. There you
There
go.
you go.
Yeah, you got it. You saved it.
Got it with the classic. Tell me a little bit more about that. Dude, that gets you out of anything,
Anything.
you know?
All
Tell
right.
me a little
So
bit more about that. I can't.
so for the contemplation phase, um, here's some example questions. Let me see if this again about the meds. I don't know why. What do you think is preventing you from taking steps to accept help, treatment, or medications?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
What are you most concerned with, Greg?
Are you asking me?
How do
Don't get
you
me
and
started.
how would you think you would feel if you took your medication, Greg?
Probably really good.
Really good.
Yeah,
Why don't you want to feel good, Greg?
I want to. Do
Well,
you? Yeah, I do want to. I want to
why
start taking
why
it.
do you keep harming yourself, Greg?
I want
And
to be
not
med
taking your
compliant.
medication? All right.
Yeah, there's a lot that these are good. Yeah, I can see, am I being useful? But I don't know. I still feel like you got to use the whole bag. You need the whole bag of tricks.
So, preparation phase. It seems like you're considering making a change. Could we talk about this, Greg?
Sure.
You have to say Greg at the end of each sentence
Hmm.
so he knows that I'm talking to him, right?
Well,
He's looking
maybe
around.
that's
He's
a
probably
tactic
looking around.
on helping people feel like, heard,
Sure.
personalized.
Uh, there may be ways I can support you. Would that be helpful to you, Greg? Okay. That's preparation. All right. So for action phase, um, how have we done since the last time we met? Did you run into any challenges? Yes. What were some of your thoughts? How'd you deal with forgetting to take your medication? They're still on the medications. I don't
Oh,
know why that's an ongoing thing for this. And then we got maintenance. There's no questions for maintenance other than what we just talked about in
it's
the
a
action
lot of
phase.
med compliance stuff, huh? I guess that
I
makes
guess
sense.
so. Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
So if you, I know when we were in school, there was a video we had to watch. Do you remember that video for motivational interviewing?
Maybe. I
It
don't.
was a guy and like a probably like a 20 something year old, maybe. I just remember him sitting next to him and it was like an older therapist and he was wearing like a white coat, I think. And it was just felt very generic and
No,
cheesy.
nothing says we're equals like one person wearing a lab coat.
I remember watching those and I couldn't tell if it was real or not or if it was scripted, but I'm pretty sure it was real. But I think you can get those on YouTube if anyone's interested in looking up some motivational interviewing scenarios.
We'll keep that in
Um,
mind.
so I'm taking it by Greg's ambivalent attitude towards the end of this
Yeah.
episode that he's not completely sold, or he just really likes his new hat.
I know. I'm having problems with it staying
You're
on the
on
right.
camera, so people are
I know.
watching you adjust your hat 1,000 times.
That's hey, look, something don't
Something to look at.
That's people are like, I get it, man. I can never get my hat right either. You're not part of the Bald Brotherhood. You don't understand. So, yeah, no, I like MI, I like the components of it, but I just feel like you could just kind of call this person-centered therapy.
But it's
And
more about fostering a change versus just accepting who the person is and where they're at.
it's almost like, yeah, no, totally. But like I think it's like people were feeling like person-centered therapy was just going to be way too long and too open-ended, and they needed to tighten it up. It's almost like, well, I used to do this workout called Insanity, and then now they have like
Oh
an
my
insanity.
God, you did do that, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And it's like max 30 or like 30 minutes. And this is kind of like the
Came
30
in like
minute
a
version.
10 disc box set.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I did do that.
All right.
I would do it again.
Um, I kind of like motivational interviewing. I, after doing the research, this was another one that I was like, I actually do this quite a bit
Hmm.
and I don't even really think about it. I probably don't do it as refined or as like detailed as what they're saying here as far as like some of the key steps because I actually am not even doing it intentionally. But if I did want to tweak my approach a little bit, I feel like it would be a really easy adjustment. And I think it's really beneficial to people who want to make change.
You know what's funny? I know people are probably almost done with this, but I
Just you,
think,
Greg, just you.
no, I think that like I am going to start, one of my resolutions is like doing more, and it's not like I've had someone who said anything about it, but just for my own purposes, like more structured therapy, because I've always been kind of like free flowing and like what's necessary at the time, just kind of, but maybe structured is the way to go. But again, that would take someone who is like, I need to get this thing taken care of, this one thing.
Yeah.
And that's rarely, sometimes someone will come in for anxiety or depression and then the next week they're not even worried about that anymore. It's like something different, you know?
Well, I was just going to say structure goes right out the window as soon as you try to
Yeah.
implement structure. Literally every time I'm like, all right, we're going to work on this. And now I know what our framework is going to be in the next week. It's a
It's out the window.
100, yeah, it's a 180 detour into
Yeah.
something else. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like we're
So,
going to work on sleep hygiene. I slept like a baby. And you're
right,
like, okay, well, all right.
right. Well, all right. So that's motivational interviewing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I just have a few housekeeping things I got to say to people. So, the last few weeks, we have jumped from one podcast platform or hosting platform, I should say, to another. And it's been kind of a mess. I apologize to some people who lost access to us for a period of time. We had some issues with our Spotify platform, and there was apparently two pages of us, and the one that everyone was actually subscribed to was unavailable for a period of time. So I actually had somebody reached out to us on YouTube, said they switched over on to there for the time being. I appreciate that person even letting me know. It actually kind
Wow.
of red flagged it for me, so I knew there was an issue, and I was able to get that resolved pretty quickly once it was brought to my attention. But if that person didn't say that, I wouldn't even have known, to be honest. Um, we're still kind of working out the kinks of the new hosting platform we're on, so it's been a work in progress.
Obviously a lot of this is like I feel, it's taken me a few weeks to kind of adjust to new working environment, and that's been super stressful for me. So, thank you for everyone for bearing with us, and we will get back on track.
Yep, we did miss last week with some scheduling issues, so it wasn't not like a change we're making permanently to every other week. For now, we're still hoping to be able to go weekly and keep this going. But you know, again, like Greg said, thanks for bearing with us on that. No airing last week. And then the last thing I was going to say is we're not on Buzzsprout anymore. So for people who had subscriptions on Buzzsprout, I'm hoping those subscriptions were just closed out for you guys. We're now on Apple subscriptions, which I'll put a link up on our social media and I'm not sure where else it will show up, but if you want to participate in supporting the show, I'm also going to give you a pretty decent reason why you should do that. With the subscriptions, at some point, we are also, and hopefully very soon, going to offer little mini episodes, which will dive into little short, brief topics that we find to be interesting. It's not going to be like as structured as these. It'll be really casual and um, maybe even weird sometimes. We have like a little laundry list of thoughts of topics for those, very short episodes. Maybe just exploring a concept or a trend or something that happens, a phenomena, who knows?
Yeah.
Um,
Phenomena.
but that will be something that will be only for subscribers, and then there might be other perks that will come along with that, but Apple subscriptions is where that will be available. And I think that's about it for now. We've gotten so much so many comments, and we got another review recently, so thank you to everybody who's been doing those. They're so appreciated. I hate to sound like a broken record, but we could always use more. So if
Hmm.
anybody else is able to, and you haven't done so already, we would love for more feedback, more reviews and ratings. Just helps us grow. So thank you for the support, and we will see you next week.
We will see you next week.
Have a great day, everyone.
Good night.
Bye bye.